Hello and welcome. Last week I had my webinar interrupted by Bruno, so this week I thought I'd kick off with my other cat, Bravo. He's our 20-pound gorilla of a cat, if you will. So wanted to make sure he could say hi before we got too far into it.
Hello, Bruno.
Hello, Buddha.
But very awesome episode 50, guys, and we get to have Joe Alapat, who's coming off an amazing conference, your guys' first one, customer conference, RoarCon, and we will be diving into that. And I'm very excited because, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. This is your first day back in office, and you're hopping on a Senteon webinar, or is this day 2?
No, I've been here since actually Monday. Actually, after RoarCon, I had a little bit of work, and then I went to Iceland.
Oh, you did? Wow.
And toured around Iceland, which was amazing, and then came back. This is day 3 of coming back. But you know what it's like to be the founder, right? There's no checking out.
No, you're supposed to tell me there is a checkout. I need a light at the end of this, Joe.
Well, you do need a mental health break, so you do.
For sure. Good for you, Joe.
My spouse for working on vacation, but yeah, it's good. You got to do the balancing act.
That's awesome to hear. So just to set the agenda today, I will kick off just doing a little housekeeping on Senteon, what we do, and some events we have coming up. And then we're going to do a little different thing. We're going to actually talk about something Joe has been working on the background with a matrix. So we'll review that. And then we will get to the educational portion of the show where we talk about the actual settings. So with that, I am going to just go ahead and take my screen share over and populate that on. So again, Senteon is a platform that hardens workstations, servers, and browsers to the CIS standards. We actually perform that remediation, which we'll talk about how Senteon and LionGuard work together. But our next show is going to be at CanITCon, September 8th. Outside of that, we are also doing a Pitch It program, and we just had our Battle Royale scheduling. I believe Senteon's going against our friend Dave Mayick from Defense X. So we'll be doing pitches. Yeah, I'm pretty excited getting a chance to do just a Senteon pitch, because a lot of the material I put out and a lot of the interviews you do, it's a lot agnostic, educational. So this will be my chance to really talk about the features, which is pretty fun. Outside of that, we also do webinars on things outside of just the benchmarks. So I'm doing a presentation with Jared Brantley on automation, right? Hackers love the manual. Yeah, I thought that was a creative title. And all of our webinar content that we produce, you can find that directly on our Senteon website or our YouTube channel. We do try to write blogs about these as well. And if you do want to take advantage of a free perk for being part of the webinar, hit this login button. You can make a free account, and you do get freemium access to all of the settings and their crosswalk mappings. Even though we talk about CIS in this series, these settings map across the board to requirements and so forth. And you can always click into it and see exactly what the setting is. And the last perk I'll mention before we get to the things we really want to talk about, you can run free assessments with Senteon to see where you currently sit with the CIS benchmarks on that workstation, server, or browser level. Again, we're very scoped into just that area. And we'll let Joe talk about the more broad picture and the bigger picture that maybe they also provide. So with that said, let's go ahead and introduce who Joe is. Joe, I got to meet you in person at RSA this year. Rich and our friend Dan Lee from Red Cup IT both introduced us. I mean, you've built an amazing company from the ground up, but Joe, please give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey over the last, I'd say, probably about 25 years, 26 years.
It's been 26 years
in IT and security. But in the MSP world, I actually started in 2001. So that's been about 23 years now. We're actually founded an MSP with a business partner, and then we brought on 2 other folks, and one of those being a good friend of mine, Vincent, who is my co-founder here at LionGuard. So we went through the MSP days of managing IT infrastructure and security for big brands like Bank of America and Chase and government entities, Department of Defense, fun brands in Houston like Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. And, through all of that, we learned a lot. I lost a lot of my hair, and I couldn't get enough of the MSP world. So we sold that business. And then in 2015, guess what we did? We founded LionGuard to go back to bring some magic back to the MSP ecosystem, and also help end customers around both understanding what they even have in their infrastructure, from cloud to endpoint, which is this amoeba mess of all this tech that we have to take care of. It's funny. It's a lesson I learned from running our business. We did something horrible. We never said no to a customer, which means we were on the front end of every major trend, whether it was virtualization back in the early 2000s to things like AWS, to the earliest versions of Office 365, which was called BPOS way back when, and supporting Macs early on. All these things we learned the hard way. But the reality is it was a horrible business idea to go off and try to do everything, but it gave us a peek into what every MSP does today, which is, guess what?
Everything.
Right? The customers, you're taking care of that, right? And that's a very loaded question when either your boss or your end customer asks you, hey, you got that, right? And that is the dilemma that we're facing when we're thinking about managing IT and managing the attack surface, because we do need to look at it like that, because you've got all these threat actors out there looking to do us harm. And it's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in, and we have to take that seriously. And so that's what LionGuard focuses on.
You gotta think like a hacker.
What's that?
You gotta think like a hacker, right, Joe?
That's Rich. I mean, we've got to think like them. We got to support our businesses in being successful, but at the same time, we have to build infrastructure that's resilient to attacks, and really make sure that we build environments that are survivable from those, so that we don't have catastrophic events. And those are things to keep in mind. And so, so that's what we focus on. We bring visibility. We shine the light on the complete cloud all the way to endpoint, where there's interesting tie-ins here, where I'm very interested in what Senteon's doing, is as we shed light and we identify the weaknesses across the stack, what Senteon does is at the endpoint level, actually harden that infrastructure and bring it up to this state that it needs to be at, aligned to CIS controls, right? Which is great. I love the CIS controls. We really follow what CIS does at LionGuard, and I look at it as the most understandable, down-to-earth framework when it comes to IT and security. It's a very, it's a practitioner's way to actually get the job done, and I find that to be very gratifying for someone who's read many a document.
So I'm going to try to hold back asking all my follow-up questions, because I know we have extra content to get through today, but you could say you built LionGuard to prevent others from losing their hair. Is that fair to say? Make things a little bit easier?
I love your intro, Joe, because I was thinking about that too. I've been, in the industry longer than I will admit at this point, but yeah, we've almost come full circle a little bit. When I started, there was, a mainframe computing, kind of centralized computing, and then things moved to client server technology and networks and all that kind of stuff. And now I was kind of likening it too, with so much on the cloud now, it's almost becoming more of that centralized environment again that we got away from in the past, coming full circle. A lot of technology change over that period of time.
We're basically using dummy terminals. Is that what you're saying, Rich?
Yeah, it's pretty much. They need to be configured proper. They're smart. They're not dumb, though. They're smart. So they need proper configuration.
No, it's true. Because if you think about a browser, for instance, it's a window into amazing services that exist very far away from the browser. And that window really is what makes a lot of this possible. So it is interesting. Everything's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yep. Absolutely. And let's go ahead and pull up this matrix that you're talking about. And I'm going to give you a transition question here, just because, from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, I will give you a shout out here. You've been a huge mentor. We haven't had that many conversations, but the ones we've had, they've actually been impactful. And I do reference them throughout. So thanks for being a champion to other early stage vendors looking to make, not just a feature, but actually build a platform and be a standalone company. So huge shout out to you on giving the time of day to be here, and also the mentorship sessions before. But one other thing, and again, let's pull up this first slide in the background here. You can pull it on the screen. Cool. You mentioned being that entrepreneur and saying yes to all. It allowed you to learn the trends, learns what's going on. But, from, again, a mentorship live on air, do you regret saying yes to all? Is there some lessons learned of why to do this or why not to do this you can share?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to scale a business, you really have to know what you're not going to do first before you really lean into what you are going to do. And that's a it's an inverse statement, because a lot of people think about what they're going to do, but when you can verifiably say, look, these are the things that are just not in the zone for us as a business or me personally, what you're doing is you're identifying and leaning into your 10x. And that's something that I talk about a lot, which is what were you just built to do? Where are you in flow state? And what are the things that come naturally? Because when you can align to that, what happens is you're going to naturally deliver amazing value. And the people around you are going to say, wow, how did you do that? And you're going to say, well, that was easy, right? And that's what you want to see happen. And so by saying no to things very specifically and identifying those things and knowing what those are, you're leaning into the yes, which then leans into your differentiator, which ties into something that is a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which I really love a lot, which allows you to pick a strategy that says, look, this is where we're going to go high, and we're going to deliberately underinvest here because we see a market opportunity and an innovation that lies when we really go high in these specific areas. So it's definitely a strategy I would recommend. Do say no. Don't do what I did. Don't lose my hair saying yes to everything. I don't think that that's a strategy for success. I just got lucky that I survived it.
Stay away from the red ocean if I took away anything from that book.
Most definitely.
Awesome. And I did drop that link into the chat, so anyone who wants to check out the book, absolutely feel free. So, Joe, we have a screenshot pulled up here, Cyber Resiliency Framework. And honestly, while we're introducing this, let's actually make this the whole screen so everyone can read through this, and then we'll go back to this format here in a minute. But Joe, you had RoarCon. I imagine this was one of the slides you used. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, honestly, this was born out of getting feedback from so many operators, technicians, security professionals, as well as leaders at MSPs and businesses, where they said, look, there's a lot going on, in the IT and security world. And it's not clear to me, this is people coming to me saying this, when I go to these events, I see all of these vendors and I don't know what these things do. And I know that there's overlap, but every time I show up, there's new logos and it's very frustrating. And it's interesting because I'm in the space and I'm watching the logos and I catalog things in my head and I know where they fit. And I'm having trouble keeping up with so many of the things. So I can't even imagine what end customers do when they show up at these big events like an RSA, right? Or a Black Hat or
ChannelCon that we just had.
It's overwhelming, for sure.
Right? Any of these events. And so when you think about that, and when you think about then, well, how complex is it to actually run an operation where you have to actually both address IT and security? Because these are yin and yang. And this is something, there was a study recently, this is something I just believe in my heart, that IT and security are not two separate boxes. They are tied at the hip. They are very important to be interlinked and aligned. There are separate areas of focus, but they have to be aligned. And the reason why I find this interesting is recently there's a proof point. Sophos had done a study recently that actually highlighted this, and they saw that when IT and security are put into separate boxes and separate reporting structures, there's a certain level of response and a certain level of ransomware payment. And then when they're together and they go through the same reporting structure, there's another level of response and another level of ransomware payment. Do you know which one turned out better? What do you think, Zach?
I was addressing the LinkedIn comments. I'm sorry, Joe. Rich, give your thoughts.
It's you know what it is? It's where IT and security, right, are mapped together.
Right.
And I think this is where, when you think about CIS, right, CIS has the IT and security pieces. You see this interlinking that's happening, and it goes through these controls. And what you'll notice is, wait, doesn't the IT person do that? Okay, wait, but the security person does that. But the IT person does this. And what the larger industry doesn't realize is that the IT operator does have the privileged access. They do have the ability to flip the bits. And they are in control of the security posture to a large degree. And if the IT operators don't realize this, that they're ultimately responsible for keeping the shields up, and the security professionals are there to ensure that the appropriate controls are in place, and then making sure that no intruder gets in the house and without being detected and responded to, If we don't realize that, then we don't really understand what we're accountable for. And so what this framework largely defines is that, hey, look, IT and security are yin and yang. They are together, and that we do want those better outcomes. We don't want to pay those massive ransomware payments, and we want to recover in less than a week. We don't want to recover in 3 weeks or a month or never recover. And so this framework largely defines a set of down-to-earth terms that we're actually going through a mapping process now of both CIS and NIST to connect the dots, because when we talk to organizations, they ascribe to different frameworks. Mm-hmm. And when they do, I need the decoder ring to know how to talk to them, and just as much as they need the decoder ring to talk to us. So this is an attempt to actually to distill everything down, and this is 25 plus years of IT and security experience, along with plenty of other peers in our company, to say that, guys, it starts with architecture. It all starts with architecture. And one example I like to share is, if someone came to you, Zach, and said, hey, I need to do, I'm a founder and I need to start a business, and I need email, and my co-founder, he's a finance guy, and he needs Excel, and he's an advanced Excel guy. What are you going to recommend? Right? That's the thing. And so a good architect is going to say, nah, I've been really enjoying Google Workspace. So why don't you go try that out? And not that Google Workspace is any less or that Microsoft 365 is any better, right? They're both great products. But here's the deal. You got to listen to your buyer. And the buyer said a key word. They said they wanted email. They're starting up a business. And they said that the co-founder liked Excel and they were very advanced. That should lead to a lot of questions that then have answers, which then say, wait a second, this person probably needs Microsoft 365. Hey, are you a Mac user or not? Okay, well, great. Okay, maybe you get the Mac, you get Excel. But let me just tell you, Excel runs a little bit more advanced on Windows. We need to make a clear determination there. That level of quick answers and that connecting of the dots, it happens based on work experience. And
what's really good about that, and Amanda in the comments has dropped some really good things agreeing with this. And we actually did a webinar just yesterday about, the right account manager, BDR, when you're in those sales discussions, to actually listen and respond with questions to further understand. So, hey, my co-founder's super big into Excel, asking the follow-up questions. Hey, do you think he'd ever move off of it? Or, what makes him what aspects of Excel are his favorite? Because then maybe you could recommend something better. But understanding that full picture is so huge. And that's something I know Amanda and I know MSPs will echo over and over, wanting to better understand.
The more you listen, the more opportunity you find, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, I should have known this going into it, but I didn't realize the extreme passion you have for the combination of that IT and security aspect. So this is actually a very real challenge for Senteon as a company, right? We're remediating security settings, but historically, settings are an IT function. Why are security settings under IT, right? So this is actually a huge challenge area for us. And, I'll let you respond to this at high level, but if you're up for it, Joe, I might want to do a whole nother session on this topic if you're up for it.
It's funny because most of your buyers are going to be IT operators, because hardening is actually done by IT operators. And this is
where does that budget come from? Who pays for it?
It's in the IT budget, and it's taken for granted. And this is why breaches happen. Like the reason why CIOs and CISOs, when you ask a legitimate CIO and CISO, when they show up new to a company and someone says, what are you going to do that's so special that's going to make this environment more secure so that a breach won't happen next time? They're going to say, first, look, a breach can happen.
Yep.
You need to make this environment survivable. But here's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of blocking and tackling. You're going to hear that phrase, blocking and tackling. You know what that's code for? Hey, we need to do asset discovery. We need to do asset management. We need to do good configuration management. We need to do good vulnerability management. We got to go patch. And then, we got to go harden all this stuff. And we're going to put it all together. And then we're going to go monitor. It's too much, right?
Yep.
And the reality is it's all the heavy lifting. It's the dirty work that goes, by the way, if you go 1 through 8 CIS controls, which guess what? It takes effort and time to do those things right. And you got to go through those implementation groups, right? IG1, do the layer of the onions, do IG2. Yep. And if you do those correctly, you will have great outcomes.
Joe, isn't it more fun, though, to go to RSA and pick out the shiniest new product and just install that and say everything's good?
That's the interesting thing is most security companies that are well-funded, have the money to spend on some interesting,
Sure.
shiny, glitzy stuff. And look, you can't fault any of the vendors out there who are trying to sell what their offering is. And it's up to the buyers to ultimately make those right selections. But the reason why I feel so firmly around us having vendors talk to vendors and have a 10x ecosystem, because this isn't me throwing some blind thing out there into the market. This is actually being tested. I actually want to go to all the vendors, and this is what I've been doing. And I talked to you about this, Zach,
Yep.
is that we're going to put Senteon's logo in the right spot.
Yep.
Why? Because we want this to be a decoder ring, so people know, okay, well, what are you doing for hardening your endpoints exactly?
Senteon.
Well, we're just kind of, we're just doing a little bit of this and a little
Basics,
right?
You know what is a trend I'm seeing, and I'm actually glad you bring this up. A lot of our partners, most of our partners are trying to meet CIS. That's who Senteon really works the best with when an MSP wants to work to meet a framework. Anywho,
Yep.
a lot of these MSPs are taking even just an Excel sheet, listing the 18 controls, the 153 safeguards, and then we'll say this vendor fits this. And
Yep.
I thought that was good. That sounds good. But the reality is having one vendor for that safeguard, it can be better with two vendors meeting that safeguard in different ways. So where your concept comes into place is instead of having 153 categories, a bunch of columns, this is now 12 categories. And you're showing how many vendor solutions or how many processes or internal things you have going on to account for this category as opposed to a granular control. I think that's a little bit more digestible.
Yeah, the hope is that you can talk to executives and boards at a level to say, look, we have weaknesses here, here, and here. It could be in detection and response, right? It could be that you just don't have the level of investment there, and you can clearly articulate. See this thing called boom? Boom happens when initial access happens in MITRE's attack framework. And you can explain to them, oh, okay, this is when a threat actor gets in the door. Well, what do you need to do when the threat actor gets in the door? Well, we need to detect within milliseconds, and we need to respond automatically. That's a down-to-earth conversation, and you can put it on the diagram and you say, see that detect box right there? That's where that happens. Mr. Budget Holder, we have nothing here to help us with this. We need something for that box. Like that's where the thought process is. How do you put the puzzle pieces together to say that you have either a process, a person, or a technology, or a combination of all three,
or a problem?
Yeah, or you have a problem. Yeah, there you go. And so this is where PPT is not a PowerPoint. It's actually people, process, and technology. And the combination of those three is where you get to a managed outcome. And you preferably want to have a managed outcome on each one of these boxes. And that's tough. It's a lot of work. It's blocking and tackling.
The basics, the not sexy basics.
Yep. Yeah.
And Amanda shouted out, no one likes paying for insurance. It just makes me think of cyber insurance. Obviously, that's a hot topic, right? I mean, they right now are still they're constantly improving and formulating how do we identify risk? How do we make the premiums, et cetera, et cetera. Something like this, if I was an insurance provider, if I was Fifth Wall, I've talked to Will Brooks, we have our own webinar together, but I may be more interested to see, hey, how many vendors do you have focusing on this left of that boom image, right? If you have no vendors there, that scares me, right? If they're only on the right side, it's like, yeah, you're protected, but you're basically telling me you're accepting something is going to happen and you're not even taking the time to prevent it. I think Senteon, and we'll work on this together, probably fits more on left, of course, but even that respond and a little bit recover, because we do put things back at the config level. So it'll be interesting to see where we sit here.
I mean, you squarely sit in the protect square,
okay.
Because the purpose of endpoint hardening is to mitigate the chance, right? So to minimize the chance of initial access being successful, right?
Yes.
This is where we get into the Chrome controls, right? When those paths of entry happen, what we're trying to do is disrupt it with security controls when you harden. So anything that involves hardening is always left of boom because it's a planned event. You don't do that in response immediately. It's too late. You're not you have to harden the environment.
I understand.
Recovery, right? And you're doing the refinement. When you're doing the root cause, you're like, oh my God, we didn't set up our Chrome profiles correctly and we didn't set those settings right. That's where you refine and you go back and go, okay, we got to put something in place and architect our environment to actually even have endpoint hardening. The whole
See,
thing.
that helps me understand, because from my perspective, I was thinking, bad actor compromises a machine, changes configs, breach happens. Senteon does put the changed configs back. In my mind, that was respond, right? Bad actor changes, Senteon puts back. But now with that story in mind, I understand. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Largely, detect and respond, as the security industry calls it, is disrupting a threat actor in progress to plug the hole, to give yourself enough time to investigate and then eradicate and then recover, right? And this is where you get your cyber insurance company involved. You bring the team in, but detection and response, in the sense of security right of boom, is simply to stop the threat actor. And when you seek to recover, you have to be careful, by the way. You cannot alter the environment until you've got the cyber insurance folks coming in. After that's done and you've eradicated, that's when you can go back to, hey, let's go harden the environment, because you have to be careful, because your forensics gets completely out of whack if you start making changes in the environment.
That is actually something I am also doing a webinar on with Eric Taylor and Chris Lair. So I just interviewed Eric this morning from Barricade Cyber, and he literally talked about that exact point. So that'll be a really good follow-up.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, Joe, we're going to start transitioning to the educational individual settings, but is there anything else you want to leave us with on this graphic you guys came up with?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying, look at the key thing here is if we think about the CIS control specifically, what we're actually looking at is, look, there's so much about asset inventory, which I absolutely love that CIS puts it at CIS 1, 2, 3, and 5 very early in the process. Number 4 is about secure configurations, which is what LineGuard and Senteon are all about. So believe me, these are things that these are so critical. And what is that telling us? It's telling us that we first need to know before we can secure and manage, right? We just need to know. It's basic knowledge. That's underneath that identify piece. And what we've understood is that the market largely is struggling around asset inventory. They are struggling. There's several people who misunderstand and think that they've solved it. But if you literally have all the device assets, all the software, all the data regions, all the identities and associated user accounts, you are in the 0.0001 minority running automatically, not in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm telling you, people don't have this. Why? Because it is a massive problem. By the way, guess who's trying to solve it? LineGuard's trying to solve this. We are taking the first steps to actually take all the data we've already captured to dedupe and move that forward. And that's largely to make sure that left of boom, you have the greater impact in terms of ROI. When you do things left of boom, what happens is you have more leverage. It's less costlier to architect properly, identify properly, and assess properly. You know what sucks is when you're far right, where you're seeing that red and you're having to recover. That's when you're talking about millions and billions of dollars.
Yeah,
we don't want to be
your choices are limited at that point.
Yeah, and you're responding, and you know what? You're reactive. Let's use the most overused word. There's only 2 overused phrases that I think about in the MSP arena: proactive, and then trusted advisor. So we've covered them both. Well, that's pretty much it right there. And cyber resilience is the key. Cyber resilience basically means make your environments survivable. So think about Gumby. Gumby gets punched in the face. He pops back up again. That's what we want our infrastructure to run like. He can get punched in the face, and it's like, hey, what's up, guys? I'm back.
Absolutely. And I mean, kudos to LineGuard. You are painting that full picture, because without the MSP or the enterprise understanding that full picture, what Senteon does becomes a little harder to digest, right? You can show all these aspects. Of course, you're also showing the endpoint aspect and saying, hey, here's a vendor who can clean up this entire report, all of this bad. They handle that area. Another vendor could say, oh, that area of this broader picture LineGuard is showing cleans up this area. So it allows, obviously LineGuard at the top of this pyramid, but it allows vendors to say, hey, we fit into this picture. And that's really beneficial when, a company like ours, we're a little earlier on, we can align to, you've been quite successful, Joe. LineGuard is awesome. To align to companies who've already established themselves, and we can show our results in your platform.
Yeah, and I think really, keep in mind that this framework is out. It's something that's years of learning LionGuard delivers part of this. We're not claiming to deliver all of this.
Right.
We deliver a piece of this puzzle, but we believe in a 10x ecosystem. And what I truly believe is that vendors need to work together to make it easier for our customers to be able to understand what creates the cohesive fit. We all remember back in the day with Windows Vista, right? When it came out, unfortunately, the drivers weren't tested properly, right? And what happened is the interlinking pieces didn't work well together. And so finally, Windows 7 came along and it saved the day. Why? Because the ecosystem of vendors work together on Windows 7. It's the same thing when it comes to IT and security. As vendors, when we don't work together and figure out where we connect, then we don't provide a manageable outcome for our customers. And they're left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to shove this puzzle piece into the wrong spot here. And they're like, can you guys talk to each other? And I've been there. And it's so frustrating when vendors don't talk to each other, right? And we try so hard to try to address that and actively work towards driving valuable outcomes, right? That's why we're here, right? That's why. And thank you for the invite to,
Yeah. I mean, thanks for doing it after RoarCon. I didn't realize when we had this on the calendar, you were going to be coming off such a big event. So thanks for not rescheduling. But no, that's spot on. And another just takeaway for myself, and we can show the next slide here, is going to ChannelCon. That was our first real official booth, right? We had a full tables, TV, and all that jazz, right? But I got to walk the floor and see about, I think it was 220 vendors that were there. LionGuard being one of them, right? And I got to introduce myself, and I realized how much vendors wanted to work together. It's this better together philosophy that's starting, and I'm excited to hopefully champion that through what I do here with webinars and provide more educational material about how Senteon works with LionGuard, Senteon works with Threat Captain, and all of the material around that. So with that, let's transition to a little bit more technical talk, even though that was pretty technical. These CIS benchmarks are recommendations. They're not, every single one is not for everyone, but they do mitigate real risk. This slide here is just calling out a handful of different MITRE attack techniques that the settings we'll discuss here in a moment will mitigate the risk of being successful if hardened. Joe, please, you wanted this slide at the beginning this time. Yep. Tell us why. Tell us about some of these aspects here.
This is the why, right, Joe?
This is definitely the why, and it's also the 10x ecosystem at work. Because look at what we're talking about here. We're talking about CIS. We're talking about MITRE. We're talking about Senteon. We're talking about LionGuard, and then we're talking about the infrastructure like Windows, Chrome, right? So when these pieces come together, which is how we run our businesses with technology, right? It's complicated. So we're thankful that we have some degree of benchmarks and standards. I love MITRE's attack framework in explaining how an attacker actually achieves their nefarious goals. If you have not gone and reviewed MITRE's attack framework, it is a treasure trove of interesting information, and it's constantly up to date. And you know what? It's scary because that MITRE attack framework is updating faster than any other framework. You know what that says? That means the attacker is learning and trying out new techniques faster than defenders are. And that's scary. And that's why we've got to figure out how our defenders frameworks actually keeps pace with that. And it's tough. And this is where, I love the fact the pace of CIS. Hey, yeah, it is a version upgrade and things change, but you know why it changes? Because the attackers are changing the way that they're attacking environments. So we need the benchmarks and the frameworks to keep up. And so this right here, I think that what's important about something that people need to understand is everyone thinks about the external attack surface. And, I could ask,
yes,
there's the external attack surface, right? It's, hey, there's the firewalls, and there's the front end to Microsoft 365.
I hardened my 365. Why do I care about the endpoint?
Yeah, there's all this, right? And then email security comes along and said, wait a second, we let this outside thing flow right to our desktop with these crazy links and things to invite us to click on them, right? So there's an entry point that, by the way, creates a level of externalness that people take for granted. And then here's the killer, that window we have into the world with very little protection just going out there, wandering around wherever we want to go.
Dark alleys everywhere.
And that is a fun door. You are one step away from disaster, but you're also one step away from insight. And the fact that you're kind of walking that cliff, and if you don't have the controls in place, guess what happens? Someone can potentially
bad things happen.
Capture.
Yep. It's just likelihood of it being successful. People are going to try these attacks listed on the screen either way, but by having these preventative, I think the buzzword proactive, right? Proactively changing these settings will mitigate the chance of successfulness.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting here. So, like, you see these techniques like peripheral device discovery. You've got file and directory discovery, clipboard access, audio capture. This is some scary stuff, guys. I mean, think of the things that you clipboard. People clipboard passwords.
Oh, yeah.
And, audio capture, that's just, oh, my God,
One thing I think a lot of people don't realize, and we talk about really weekly on the show, is these types of techniques, audio capture, screen capture, that was horrible. Capture. Doing these webinars, my mouth gets all gummy and dry. Anyway.
Is when you have your screen capture misconfigured. It's crapture.
Yes.
Don't let the bad guys capture you. Anyway, they can better facilitate and better make a more official looking fish, right? This can be more incentivized information to make that fish better and increase the likelihood of your employees clicking on that link because, hey, they have a screenshot of my computer. That must be IT. They heard my voice. Like, that must be, right?
And, the thing I love to talk about is the attacker techniques are all about efficiency. They're out to make a buck. They're out to make some money, unless they're after revenge. Either way, what's happening is they're trying to get to that end game as fast as physically possible. I call it path of least resistance. That is the path that an attacker takes. So they're not trying to make it difficult on themselves to go, let me figure out the most complicated way to get in. No, they don't want to do that. They want to find the fastest path to get in, get out, and they're conducting business because they're taking money out of your wallet and putting it into their wallet as quickly as they can. They're trying to make a buck. That's what this is about. And so if you know that that's the case, what that means is that shields need to be up. And when you know that the advanced or the most commonly used techniques are X, Y, and Z, well, you want to protect against those things because guess what? You're going to be that hole that they're going to get through and the path of least resistance.
Yeah, that is the path of least resistance. So,
I mean, to put again, like obviously educational high level webinar, like put it in an easy metaphor. If you're actual burglar breaking into a house, are you going to choose the house that has their front door open, the gate unlocked, or are you going to choose the house that has the gate locked, the doors shut, the windows locked? I mean, if I was a bad guy, I'd probably choose the one with, cameras, no camera.
Zach, what's interesting is that
I choose the one that's open.
The analogy around this whole, security alarm thing and gates, I joke that today we keep our security alarms on and they're very glorified and we keep our front door open.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We keep our security alarms on, but we keep our front door open. And what do I mean by that? Is we have privileged users in Microsoft 365 without MFA enabled. Shame on all of us that that's still happening, but it does happen. And we have RDP, remote desktop protocol, exposed publicly on the internet. And you know who you are if you're on this thing and you've got a customer that has that's convinced you that they have to have it. You got to put your foot down. Say, no more, please, God, because that is the source of the breach. Do not let that happen. Right? These are the things you have to do is you got to close those open doors because you know what those open doors are? Path of least resistance. We're back to that again.
Yep. And I'm going to give two comments on that. One, I wish you would have been at my ChannelCon presentation because I have literally a visual made of just what you described with the front door unlocked. So to just paint a picture for everybody, I have a broken down, raggedy house, boarded up windows, like it's not very secure, right? That represents the computer, the endpoint. And then the first thing an MSP does in this context of this presentation is they fix the house, right? No. Mm-hmm. You install an EDR, you install a fence, you install whitelisting, you install cameras. And by the end of putting all these layers on top of this already misconfigured shitty house,
Yeah.
you never go back and fix the house. You just never go back. So that's why we need to shift left, change the mindset, put windows on the house, then get your EDR, right? I mean, you can argue the order. CIS doesn't argue the order. It's number 4. But anyway.
It's funny. You just reminded me of something back in 2000. This is when I got to re-meet my wife, as someone I knew in passing in college. And we had a chance to get together again in 2000. And when I went to her house or her apartment, I noticed something. I said, "Hey, where's your firewall?" And I'm like looking around and I'm like, "What's going on here?" Wait. And she had the computer plugged straight to the router. This is the time when, routers and firewalls were separate way back when. Yep. And I'm like, "Where's your firewall?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I just I stopped. I said, "Okay." I finished the conversation.
I'm sorry. This is not going to work out.
I went to the store and got her a firewall. And I'm like, "You cannot run around naked on the internet like this. We're going to put a firewall." And she, to this day, makes fun of me saying, "Do you know the first gift that my future husband got me?
Firewall.
It was a firewall." And
Pretty
I'm like,
standard.
"Yeah, it's important."
Now that's a quality guy. That's someone who cares. That no wonder you guys got married.
That's a keeper right there. That's a keeper.
I didn't win any bonus points on that, by the way. I got 0 bonus points.
All right. And the second point I wanted to call out is a shameless self-plug. So I am working with Empath right now on some learning curriculums. And Joe, maybe we should collab on one of them. But it is literally titled How to Secure RDP with Settings, right? Because there's more to it than just having it exposed and whatnot. There's actual settings, allow drive redirect. I think I went through the CIS benchmarks and I tried to count. I think I got to like 45 and I said, this is so many settings. Anyway, I'll be doing a learning track on that. And Joe, maybe we do some collab learning tracks in the future.
Oh, I love it. I love what Wes and, what
Alex and Kyle
are doing, because it's all about cyber education. Which is what we're lacking. But if you knew, then you would seek to take these steps. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that there's 45 configurations for RDP. I mean, it's just,
they include user rights assignments. They include a lot of aspects that you just don't consider, right? Yeah. Anywho, we have 17 minutes left. We have 11 settings, Joe. So hopefully no disservice to the audience. We had too much fun with the buildup of this episode. We will have to kind of rapid fire with you, but let's kick off this first setting. So allow or deny screen capture. CIS recommends to, of course, disable. Why don't we want screen capture available?
Because you're going to have crapture. That's what's going to happen.
I cannot speak, man. My C's and my R's.
I mean, one of the things that's worth noting is, I don't know how many people know about command and control techniques, but the purpose of a threat actor's attack technique is to gain a foothold, and then to be able to start staying low and doing things like screen capture and all kinds of craziness. Why? Because they're studying what you're doing.
Yes.
They know what sites you're going to. They're spying on you, and they know exactly what you're doing, so that when you go off on vacation, your controller is going to be told a couple things, and somehow $100,000 is going to get shipped out somewhere when you're gone on vacation. And
avoid the crapture.
And so that's a bunch of crapture. So don't let that happen to you.
And we got a new hat design, it sounds like. Don't allow crapture. One thing I do want to note on this setting, these are all recommendations. And in the bottom right, you will notice this is a level 2. I think we can all be in this room and think of a potential use case that an MSP's end client would say, whoa, I need to take my clipboard. I need to take screenshots to do my job. So that's why these are recommendations, right? If you don't need this function, you should follow it. But this is a level 2 saying it might cause disruption.
It's interesting to think about that is like, how do you activate these controls when you sense that you're entering into an unsafe zone versus, hey, I need to get my work done. Just to think about that. But yeah, these are tough. And this is where there's that risk exercise of, hey, what's the value I'm getting with this feature?
Yes.
And what's the cost, that I'm going to have if I turn it off? And this is where sometimes security can be the no thing, and it can be frustrating for users. So yeah, finding that right balancing act is always challenging. And with a browser, it's very challenging. So you got to pick your battles.
Yep, absolutely. And the PII information that can be on browsers too. I mean, it's just a lot of danger there. All right, we'll keep on powering through since we do have a bit of a time constraint. What's this next setting here? So control use of the serial API is set to enabled, which in this case, wonderful GPO, means do not allow any site to request access to serial ports via serial API. Anything that allows really anonymous access or using APIs probably should be watched, but of course CIS is saying don't allow. Why don't we want to allow this? What does this mean?
God, this is scary. Like that's freaky to be able to reach across the internet and access through a serial port to some device to do whatever it is. I mean, it's freaky that it's that close. And someone all the way in, I don't know, pick Timbuktu, like not
Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're sitting there clicking buttons and doing things that have access to things. Yeah, no, we don't want any of this.
Yep. I mean, just to put a like easy metaphor to this, like if I have, you know, a gadget or a toy that I'm using and say the battery dies, right? I theoretically could find someone else with an exposed battery and plug my gadget into their gadget, charge mine and steal their battery, right? It's just allowing this access that shouldn't be there to be blocked.
Yeah. And it could be a confidential device that's being plugged in via the serial device. There's all kinds of interesting things that you can do. Again, these are just open doors.
Yep.
I don't see any reason why this should ever be turned on. I mean,
I actually would argue this is a level 2 as well. I'm not sure why. But yeah.
Why should that even be? Oh, I guess there's probably maybe web-based apps that maybe use the serial port. Maybe I don't even know.
Yeah, I'm not an expert enough at this granular setting, but it's L2. Be cautious, but there's your recommendation, everyone.
Huh. I bet this thing is exposed pretty regularly. I wonder like what's typical here. Do you know the default setting is that it's
the default is just not configured, which has a behavior associated, which I will be doing a webinar on the difference between explicit and default behavior. So
I'll
talk. Yeah, it's subtle. I mean, the behavior is the same as explicit if you have it configured correctly, but at the same time, the bad actor has more ability to take advantage of a non-explicit setting. And I haven't done my research into the granularities of it, but me and my co-host will be working on that.
Wow, what a way to stay low! If you had physical access, you could plug a rogue device on a serial port,
listening device, for example.
And yeah, you could just stay low, and they think they've eradicated you, and you keep showing back up again, and no one's looking behind the device somewhere. I mean, it could be a server that has it. I don't know. That's just
very tough to detect.
There's all kinds of interesting, weird. Yeah, I would, it'd be interesting to do this trivia thing on how would you attack an environment. I don't think I want to do that publicly, but I think I'd be creative.
I love it. All right, let's get this next setting here. So we got default sensor settings. This is, again, enabled, but that explicitly means do not allow any site to access sensors. Another level 2 here. Interesting stuff here.
What is a sensor here? Like on a Mac device? Because this is the one I didn't get a chance to search what sensors would be within scope here.
I'm like, when I think of sensors,
it's a broad category of things in general.
Yeah, I consider this more like just the data behind it, and like I consider it almost like setting related. Like this is setting adjacent word choice, but yeah, I agree with Rich. It's a very broad term.
I mean, a sensor can do all kinds of things, right? And good things, but also not so nice things. So I guess the point is really understand what you're connecting and what it does. And in this case, if you're not connecting anything, let's make sure no one else is too.
Yeah, and I'd imagine these both settings are L2s because websites use them more than we realize. So that's why they're likely very disruptive. But again, if you need a lockdown environment, these are settings you test, see if there's disruption, and then you can always roll back.
Okay. Yeah, that one's a toughie. That one, I want to do some homework on that one.
Yeah. Well, these next couple or next 3 will likely not be a toughie, but clipboards. So CIS does allow some I guess flexibility here. So the recommendation here is allow clipboard for these sites is configured. So they're basically saying, hey, business, you need to explicitly accept this is allowed, or you need to explicitly not allow this. Either way, we want this explicitly configured. Joe, do you have a maybe more secure recommendation, or are you okay with it going either way?
Man, any kind of clipboard access, like clipboards to me are just like, it's the wild, wild west. I'm like very wary of using the clipboard of any kind of password copying. I just don't know where it's going, right?
Mhm.
And I worry about it, even in terms of it's in memory. It's problematic. So I always kind of lean towards, hey, let's go more locked down. Up to the point where if someone can't like do something, I get that that's, Control C, Control V.
Right.
These are things that people just are used to. I can see how that can be harmful, but I like to go tighter. Look, I've been so neurotic with clipboards. Like this goes way back, way back. I don't even know how far back, but I was at an airport where I had to log into work. I think it was early 2000s, and it was a shared workstation. And I had to do, like, there was a critical thing I had to do. So what I did is I put, and I don't even know whether this is effective. But
it made you feel good.
I put a bunch of random letters into a notepad, like just randomly, included in there where the characters that were my password. I then randomly copied and pasted the characters out of sequence into the password field, and they were put in and out of sequence. And then I hit submit. Now, granted, if they somehow captured the submission,
yes,
an HTTPS, but I felt like, you know what, I might have avoided the clipboard attack, but this is how I think about this stuff. So I worry about the clipboard.
Yep. And I love that story because that's very real, right? Those are the things that we wish everyone would consider, but many people would just use the shared workspace and not think of it.
It's unhealthy paranoia is what it is.
Yep. And I do want to correct myself here. I read this setting a little incorrectly. So this is saying is configured because this is saying you can explicitly allow clipboard on certain sites. Because this next setting here, and let's go to this next setting, it's block clipboard for these sites. So now you can explicitly block access. So sorry about that previous one. Your explanation was still spot on, Joe, but just want to make clear to the audience, these are where you can explicitly allow sites or not allow sites with these two settings.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a smart move might be that you don't allow clipboard access from a password manager. That that might be something to turn on, to say, hey, look, we just don't allow it. And that's a big inconvenience for a lot of people.
That's an L2 for sure. I'd be upset.
Yeah. The reality is it can be an attack vector. So I don't know. It's an interesting point.
There's always the give and take. I mean, security and convenience, you know that as well as anybody. It was not convenient to do the example you shared, but it was likely, we'll say likely because we don't know, but likely more secure.
Interesting.
So, all right, this next setting here, we'll just keep on moving. This is saying the default overall setting, right? So now going to Joe's explanation initially, it's either on or off. And then if you have it on, you can still turn it off on certain sites. Or if you have it off, you can still turn it on certain sites. Yeah. We don't need to beat this setting in any further, but Joe, any further thoughts on clipboard settings?
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you there's 3 settings right here on just clipboard settings. I mean, who thinks about this stuff, right? People don't spend time on it, and it's a tough choice. I guess my point here is that and I've seen your other sessions, by the way, literally the sheer number of settings, and I refer to them as configurations, are immense. And so really we have to figure out how we can standardize the approach. And I like the level 1, level 2, level 3 approach, because then you can just pick the battle and go, look, let's at least start with level 1 before we start to
for sure.
Heavy battles, and let's go with the inarguable. So that's why I like that approach. That way you can just run a policy, know that you've done basic, and then you can start to, as you get time, which unfortunately many of us don't have time to evaluate the 3 clipboard policies, you might not get to it, right? But it might be the reason why an attack vector happened. I don't, this is where you just got to manage your time properly.
Yep. Joe, you know what we call that?
What's that?
Avoiding the crapture.
Yes, and to shout out the methodology, because you're talking about a real problem. If you download the CIS benchmark PDF, this is 1,500 pages you need to read through just for a Windows 10 box. That doesn't include the server. That doesn't include 11, right? It's insane. Doesn't include the browser, right? So I'll plug Senteon as well here, right? We kind of added a third category. This category being guaranteed to make the end client notice, right? This is things like an L1 setting in CIS is don't display last username, right? So no matter what, machine locks, you have to type your username. That is a level 1, but you can bet your ass that's disruptive to a lot of people. So we added our own category of guaranteed disruption, GD, right? God damn. So that is another way that our learning mode and our expertise categorizes these settings one step even further than CIS's recommendations here.
Yeah. I mean, these are very subtle, right? And it goes back to user experience, because a lot of times if security control comes in and user experience degrades, right? And this is where it gets interesting to think through, well, how do you get the right balancing act here without pissing off the users?
Yep. Without pissing them off. That's the main thing. All right, let's we're going to get out of clipboard topic. So we got 4 minutes left. We will keep on zooming. We got about 4 settings. So default window management permission settings is set to enabled or deny permission. So again, this is saying, hey, choose one or the other explicitly. Any comments on this setting here?
This just sounds ominous. Window management. I mean, I
don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, again, like the research to go into, and this is a level 2 or okay. Yeah, I think I didn't get time to actually dig in deeply to understand, okay, what are the ramifications of denying window management? And I think every one of these things goes back to, does a normal user actually do anything that falls in this category in their day-to-day work? And if the answer is no, then turn that thing on a lockdown mode is what I would say.
Yeah.
So I would want to understand specifically, again, with window management.
Exactly. And what this
is here a little bit is maybe a bad guy could get access and maybe have a hidden window that you're not aware of as a user, if they're able to manage.
I think that's a good example. Like explicitly how I understand this setting is by having this on, you're not allowing websites to auto resize their screen or do anything in that respect. So like Rich said, if you hit an executable that opens a browser, right, it may be in the smallest form hidden in a corner of the screen or off screen, right?
Yep.
This is making it so that's not able to happen, which again, it's an L2. I disagree with that, but hey, to each their own.
Okay. This one seems a bit more scary, actually.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like if someone was in your house, right? It's like saying, hey, I'm going to move this lampshade 10 inches to the left because now it's darker where I'm hiding. No one's going to know that lamp moved, but something happened, right? This is making it so you can't move the furniture in your house without people knowing, right?
Well, I mean, this goes back to, again, if you map this to MITRE's attack framework and you know that an attack technique is using one of these open doors, that's when you have to raise it up, right? There's known exploits happening in the wild. That's when you've got to activate it. And this is where, hopefully with something like Senteon in place, you're able to do this. And on top of that, with LionGuard, you're looking at these configurations at scale, and you're also monitoring how they're changing.
Right.
Yes.
Degrade over time, unfortunately. Drift. It's terrible.
That's exactly right. We could do a whole webinar on drift.
You see that drift, something's up. You gotta understand what.
Yep. So fortunately, these next 2 settings, let's go ahead and go to the next one. These are going to be around the same thing. So this is, again, making sure you aren't allowing these resizable websites just making change. So just due to time, let's go ahead and show this next one here. But this is saying the same thing as previous, but these settings tie together. So again, the first one was the high level, then it was allow. Now we're looking at block, right? You can take these very granular if you do have the time. And if you do this at the granular level, doing it once is never going to be enough. Needing to review, modify, add, all of that's going to be needed, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we all agree time is tight. So sometimes it may be easier to just say don't allow it completely. Other times you may need to configure explicit exceptions. All right, let's go to this next setting. And Joe, I'll let you hop back into it. So ensure allow invocation of file selection dialogues is set to disabled. Why don't we want to let us read? I just want to read about it.
I don't know. Why don't we send some files out to the internet somewhere and send all that PII data out to the world? Or,
if I come across a treasure chest that's locked, I'd like to know what's in it before I open it. Isn't that the point?
Notepad document with all the passwords that you guys all have hidden away in a subfolder. Yeah, no one's getting fooled. But look, I mean, this is about data leakage type stuff here, and anything with file access or file dialog boxes, or being able to take any degree of control around, placement of maybe you fool the system into thinking that there's a different file at play here. We don't want any of this stuff. Now, granted, again, at level 2, the reality is that I don't know if you can do this policy setting based on, hey, there's some corporate tools that we know that are secured.
Sure.
For those, yes. For the worldwide web internet of just craziness, no. That might be maybe, if that's possible, that would be something I would prefer.
I think from this scope, it does look like it's a 1 or a 0, but maybe within other applications or a third-party platform, like we said, and Matt Lee is a huge advocate from, CIS takes these recommendations, assuming you have 0 other platforms, assuming you don't have Senteon, assuming you don't have LionGuard. All of these recommendations we're making can be done manually with the tools that you have already. So yeah, like you said, it could be more granular at a different level, but within the browser level, I believe this is just a 1 or 0.
Okay.
All right. We're 1 minute over. We got one more setting here. So allow or deny audio capture is set to disable, the hard one to end the episode, Joe. Do we want to allow people to hear us talk in this webinar? Do we want to be trained?
Globally, this one's a toughie. So again, I think policy driven by website would be the preference. Either that, or is there an easy way to turn it on and off? But
right.
Look, there's a lot of you talk about all these different apps that allow you to do this kind of talking over. That's what really gets impacted. If you've got local apps like Zoom and others, if you are working in a high secure type environment, then I would turn this on for sure. Yep. And the only apps you should be working with are things like Zoom or Teams, and that's it. And those are not in the browser; those are apps.
Yep, absolutely.
That's the way that I would look at that. It just depends on the security of your environment.
And shouting out CIS and Senteon, right? CIS does have recommendations on how to harden that Zoom app, right? Application hardening is a direction Senteon's going. CIS has recommendations. So, we talk about the OS, we talk about the browser, but we also need to talk about Zoom. We need to talk about your RMM hardening. All of these applications you have can be hardened to a certain extent. And that's kind of the roadmap, will be the hardening platform, making these changes. And Joe will always be telling you about these issues at the bigger picture. So then you can have a cohesive story to show management and so forth.
There it is.
All right, that is all the settings. We got one more slide here and then a wrap up. Joe, we're 3 minutes over. Do you have like 5 more minutes just to kind of close out the show, or you gotta? Okay, cool. So again, I like to show this slide. This is just really a generalized slide on the benefits of actually hardening your systems and the things you might experience or gain. So Joe, just talking to an MSP or enterprise that's just now considering doing hardening, they've never done it before. Like, why should they be incentivized to start doing this now?
Well, I've got one thing for everybody that's universal, and that's cyber insurance. And the reason why cyber insurance is important, which, by the way, those at that attack surface questionnaire that they send you to go, hey, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you know what all that's about? The majority of that is all about hardening and strong governance. That's what it is. It's like, do you have MFA enabled on your email, systems such as Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace? Do you have firewalls enabled on your endpoints? Right? Do you have BitLocker enabled or File Vault enabled to encrypt the data on those drives? These are all there because the cyber insurance companies actually have these statisticians, right? All these folks who look at the data and they go, look, this is the most common things that we're seeing that we are having to pay out millions of dollars. These insurance companies aren't as evil as most people make them out to be. I've been talking to them and they're frustrated. You know why they're frustrated? Is why can't these people get their settings right and just get the basics sorted out and stop shipping out money randomly to weird people with wires? They don't do that anymore.
They haven't heard of Senteon, Joe. There's your answer.
I can relate to that. I heard one of them say, I'm like, yeah, I don't have an argument for that. I feel your pain. The reality is that cyber insurance is a mini form of security and compliance. And the reason why it's important for an MSP is when they're working with their end customer, you generally want to stay out of the technical stuff. Like the conversation we were having here is not one you want to be having with your end customer. You need to get it right. The conversation to have with your end customer is your largest customer is asking you to have a, I don't know, $3 million cyber insurance policy. Good. Okay. So let's make sure that we have the controls in place so that you're resilient, because you just committed to your end customer, your biggest one, by the way, that in the midst of an attack, that you will be resilient and that your cyber insurance policy is in place. Because you know what happens when you screw that up? You not only have a disaster on your hands, but you have your largest end customer very upset with you because you agreed to them that you would have this policy in place, and you're in violation of that insurance policy, which means you have just disrupted your revenue source. This is not just risk to the business. This is not delivering on what you committed to with your largest customer. This is what's happening globally, by the way. Every large customer, and every one of us has a large customer, is causing this cascade effect, and they want to be resilient themselves. So they're looking at their supply chain and they're saying, hey, you better be resilient. So I need all of you guys to have a cyber insurance policy. And guess who those people are? They're saying to the next person, hey, I need you to take the cyber insurance policy, which means every one of these hardening efforts need to go up. Shields are up so that they can be compliant to the policy, so they can be resilient when an attack does happen. And you got to make sure that you've got the financial protection in place so you can recover, be survival, be like Gumby, so that you can be there for another day.
That's perfect. I think that's a great takeaway for anybody considering doing hardening. And that wraps up the proper slide part of the show. So I think we had a great amount of takeaways already. And even that conclusion on the slide was a massively good takeaway. But Joe, I always leave the guest a chance to highlight the just a takeaway from them own, a trend they're seeing in the industry, or if you just want to talk about RoarCon, like anything you want to leave the audience with to close out the show.
Look, one thing is don't let crapture happen to you. We have lots of avoid the crapture. There's lots of fun things here on this.
I think I'm gonna have to put a dinosaur logo on that, because I think of a dinosaur.
I came up with it. This could be put in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. It takes credit for it. Yeah, so don't let crapture happen to you. The reality is, look, at RoarCon, we talked about this resilience. It's a trending term. Cyber resilience is what we're all about. And it's about not just chasing intruders. You got to have that in place. You got to be able to detect them and then disrupt them. But at the end of the day, you are called in to set up the IT and security properly in the first place. Yep. That's what you're there to do. That means follow the processes. Use CIS. There's a nice checklist. There's some effort involved. So just start with IG1, right? Just get started. Let's get going and do the job right, so you feel good about providing that service to the end customer. What that does is it mitigates risk and allows you to provide value to the end customer and start talking about how you can change their business rather than being a mechanic fixing PCs, which is not where we're at, guys. That was 2000. We're in 2024 right now. The world has changed. You're here to bring value. That's what you're here to do. So that's my wrap up.
Absolutely. Incredible wrap up. Let's go ahead and make this slide the entire screen. Joe, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a great guest. And honestly, again, coming right after such a major Lion Guard event. Congrats to you and all your entrepreneurial success. So for next week, we are wrapping up the final episode of Chrome hardening. And then we're going to tackle the beautiful Microsoft Edge hardening. Spoiler alert, there is 23 more settings to secure on Edge than there are Chrome. Why? I don't know. But we will have it'll be a 12-part series as opposed to this 10-part series, and I'm really excited for that. We have an incredible lineup already scheduled out to November. Sending those calendar invites always makes the guest laugh. And you can catch all the replays of this on our website, on our YouTube channel. And if you did sit through and learn something here today and you want to reach out to Senteon, we offer free assessments. You can learn where you currently sit. And if you want to experiment with the remediation aspect, just let us know. We want to congratulate everyone and reward everyone for coming week after week. All right, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a great